So we're live. Fantastic. So last week we didn't go through the news. We should probably go through the news this week, and we'll make sure that we do. Start in no particular order. I like the one, I think you put this one, Carl, did you? 5G data usage?
Yeah, that was 5G data usage, something that's come out of some research in India. And it's three to four times, depending on your metric, of 4G, which, given it's India, obviously brings up the obvious suspects, which are streaming. I guess is number one, on video and the use of video. So use cases drive data hungry applications. My thought process in this was, well, if we go to 6G, or 6G was magically available tomorrow, which 4 to 5G for the consumer is just increased bandwidth. What are the use cases for 6G or faster bandwidth? Let's not get hung up on terminology.
Or 8G.
And I genuinely, with screen sizes as they are, you get better resolution, which is data hungry. But will compression technologies come on board to stop that? I don't know. I mean, racking my brains, I can't see anything. So it just...
So the one thing, I mean, just as you're speaking, and I don't know if this... So, I mean, the one thing we are seeing is obviously with our 5G, private 5G trials, there are more people using and finally finding a use case that justifies the extra expense for 5G tablets of the 13-inch variety. And I suppose some of the in-car screens now in vehicles are up to 15 inches, the Tesla one, but we're seeing them now in the BYD produced vehicles. And I think that's essentially what has driven the increased data speeds, usage speeds, is the bigger screen, isn't it? But how much of this is, I don't know if you remember this, but we did a lot of work with 3G a few years ago when 4G became massively congested, as every single device under a certain level was 4G enabled. And you were getting, on average, about 15 megabits a second on 4G, but you could still get about 10 megabits a second on 3G. And it used to be consistent at that. And many applications preferred a consistent 10 megabits a second versus a fluctuating, could be 100, could be out. So I don't know, but it is interesting. And I think it's, well, I mean, it's a trend. We are using more data. We are watching more Netflix. It's interesting that you mentioned compression technology, because one of the things that, again, we see, and I don't want to turn this into a 5G thing, but when you use private 5G small cells, you are able to restrict the bandwidth. And on today's modern screens, people are happy watching Netflix on a top-end iPhone, at least, or Samsung S25, etc., at 1 megabit a second. Now, obviously, if you allow 10 megabits a second, like the networks do, a handset will do that. But if your screen is only 2K max, what is the point of streaming at 4K and using at least double bandwidth? But yeah, these big tablets, I mean...
No, I was saying, well, I guess there's two elements to it. One is the consumer side, and I still don't know. You alluded to, I guess, an enterprise solution in the consumer space, i.e. in screens for cars, and I get that. What was also interesting is Verizon have come out with a report that basically, for certain applications, particularly IoT and robotics and automated vehicles, that Wi-Fi is effectively dead, because it can, basically for latency reasons. That we call it 5G, whatever G you want to call it, 5G and upwards. The latency is low enough that it becomes usable. You don't get not spots as well if you design your private network or public network correctly. I would suggest for an automated factory, it's a private 5G network minimum. And I get it for the enterprise side of it. It's just on the consumer side. It's just more stuff quickly that you don't, to your point, that you don't need.
It's where you draw the line, though, doesn't it? I mean, the case that I loved, that I think Peter or James from Telet was telling me about a golf course covering, covering a golf course with 5G is just very easy. With private 5G, covering it with Wi-Fi is endless digging up.
Yeah.
And the cost and speed of deployment, I think they're always going to coexist. I mean, we're testing now the Wi-Fi 7 access points, and they are another league as Wi-Fi 6. I'm sure if anyone's been trying Wi-Fi 6 and Wi-Fi 6E recently, and obviously 2.5 gig backhaul. And I think a lot of Wi-Fi is just cheap, nasty, and poorly configured. I mean, we heard from people using Starlinks in the events that if they have too many of them together, they don't work. And the problem is not the Starlinks or the satellite; it's the fact that everybody's using the same channels on the same router, probably with the same SSID, and having a kid in the back trying to watch Netflix unrestricted. And so, yeah, I think that it is a lot easier to control these matters with. But again, the other side of it is that just because the equipment is at a certain price, most people can put together a Wi-Fi network, whereas putting together a 5G network is still pretty special. And even 4G they tried, but certainly with 5G, the first 5G agreements that I saw in the US, Europe, and Asia, and I think you saw some as well in you guys in Africa and further afield as well, they tried to have 5G as a premium. And only the premium MVNOs would get it first, and it would be more expensive. And then everybody did what they do with every G before and try and sell the handsets cheap, unlimited 100 gig, no 200 gig, no unlimited super gig, and that all fell apart. So at the end of the day, it is just faster. But it's what we want, right? We're doing more and more. It's like we saw this with the BlackBerry. People going, the BlackBerry is so much better. It doesn't use any battery, and it's like weird because you can't do anything with it other than see your emails. The phones are just
MVNOs. That even happened in Europe. Some of the big MNOs in Europe were restricting access to even 4G sometimes. To keep the MVNOs. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's secretly just because they hadn't integrated the billing on the wholesale platform, and somebody needed an excuse. But that could just be vicious rumors. Okay, so next up, it seems like the Voda 3 merger is or isn't going ahead. What do we vote? Do we think? What is today's swingometer of merger and acquisition, competition, antitrust policy?
I think it's going to go ahead.
Sorry. I agree. No, go on, Carl.
I think it's going to go ahead. I mean, Ofcom's always had a strategy of having one more MNO in the market than the market can sustain, and yet now the UK is probably I think it's 27th report I was reading this week out of 28 industrialized countries in terms of mobile networks and its coverage, etc. And for a small island, and its resilience is quite astonishing, particularly at a slight first move. 27.
I'm really sorry, Carl, but we need to up our game and our baseline. We are 5th at drinking wine in the world, which quite frankly I thought was disappointing. Was another report that came out this week from the Association of Wine. 27th. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the EU is coming out with reports in terms of spectrum being a cash cow for governments, which it is. Spectrum auctions.
Really? We didn't see that with 3G.
Sucking investment out. Say again?
1 billion for a 3G license in the UK and Germany.
And it sucks investment out is the is the argument. And great. So 3 Vodafone merge. I mean, they've got to put restrictions in to obviously price scalping for consumers, etc., etc. But it'll happen. It has to, because Vodafone's no longer investing. Three's not investing in coverage except where they have to. So, you know,
well, on a lighter note, didn't O2 and Vodafone created Cornerstone? So now if we have three, is it like a tri-stone or a tripod? What's going to be the new? It's, but it is going to happen. One thing that I find massively disappointing is the other news, which I don't think we've got on here, but I saw recently that they were trying to say that they would do 5G coverage to 98% or 90% of the population in Scotland or something by 2035.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, just do something. I know we have to appease the antitrust and competition commissions, but let's do it sensibly for once and just not make these ridiculous claims. And I think that is the point I think you're making, no? That we've been doing these. We've essentially been building 3, 4, 5 motorway systems that your car has to choose which one it can go on. And so yes, I mean merging does in theory make sense, but in practice, as was it Keynes said, if you put multiple people with the same interests in the same room, they will conspire against the public. And I think the lack of coverage in rural areas is both now a multi-decade problem, and it doesn't get solved by saying silly things like 5G coverage across Scotland by 2035. I mean, so by then we'll have 5 to 10 years of full EVs needing to know real time where they will be charging in order to keep the grid up. And we're promising 5G. Anyway,
no, it's not going to happen.
We need more sensible. But I mean, it's a whole world in itself, I suppose, isn't it? We saw that Apple is being sued. What do we want to do next? Would you, Andy, any of them in particular you want to pick up?
No, I can add something to the Vodafone thing though, because I've been a long-term Vodafone customer, as you know. And I got an email from them today saying that although I'm on a fixed tariff, it's going up because of increased use in data and various things like that. So
don't get me started.
I know.
We have to do a whole session on processes, and we'll get Ian on it. But yeah. I've just gone through a process of seeing all those emails and going to check. Not even so before. You'd go on to compare the Meerkat or whatever comparison engine that you have in your country, and you would get a deal that was half the price of what the general network operators are. My ISPs and Vodafone are trying to put what is already twice the cost of what is public available and 4 times what is on the Meerkat. And sorry, for those of you who are not in England, we have terrible adverts. Market Meerkat. But it is shocking that we, in a cost of living crisis, we're trying to put up the cost of service to loyal customers of decades, whilst at the same time desperately attracting new customers at super discount rates. It's I don't know. I suppose it's business, but it's not great, is it? No,
particularly as over the past years, they've gradually increased my data allowance because of the amount of data that everybody uses. Of course, as an average user, I use nothing like that, and yet now they're putting the price up.
Well, that adds to the insult. They're putting the price up to, I don't know, I think I must have 20 gig or something, and if I go and get the quarter price offer, it's something like about 100 gig. Which again, we won't get onto sustainability, but honestly, if you try and use those 100 gig, there is no point to doing any recycling or turning any lights off, because you are just using ridiculous amounts of excess power to deliver something that could be delivered for 1,000th of the energy via Wi-Fi. Broken processes. I think we do want to get onto these. I've just been through a process of trying to do the same thing with my 3 broadband backup, and I've been charged for 30 days to not discontinue my service and get another service, which is cheaper. But I had a long chat with customer services, and they said, but you need to send back your old modem. It's like, fine, if you want it, it's yours. So I get sent and I confirmed, but if I'm paying for 30 days, I have to send it after 30 days. No. Yes, all in writing, emailed to me afterwards. I then get, at the point of 30 days, a note from Experian that my credit has been written to and affected because I owe £100 for a device I was still paying for. And to try and log on to this, they'd initiated two-factor authentication to try and get onto my account to check this. And of course, they were sending then a two-factor auth message to a broadband device that is very hard to read the messages on, and to boot had been cut off. So I must have spent about 5 hours to customer service. This is these are a few of the things. I know they brought their extreme cases, not extreme. They're not general cases. They're they're not the. I suppose but they should be level 1 customer journeys. When you're trying to engage people, and the same with. Anyway. So, Singtel.
I think that's the thing with the Vodafone 3 merger. Anyway, neither you could not credit either Vodafone or 3 with the best coverage in rural areas. Great inside cities and things like that, absolutely perfect. But get outside of those, and then both of them struggle. 3 in particular.
Yeah.
So it's the merger of the 2 worst possible candidates for out of city coverage, I think.
But I don't buy those arguments. I mean, I used to despair at these So we spent a large amount of time with the network operators, especially with IoT, arguing why we needed multi-IMSI, and in the end, we had to use apps on the SIM cards that measured the signal strength, and so you presented facts, and there is no. I mean, saying that one network is better than the other is, I don't know. I mean, it's like saying one wine is of the same quality is better than the other. They have different. The problem is your coverage is as good as where you're able to put masts and what you're able to put on those, and the planning. There are so many variables, and the dimensioning of the network and redimensioning the network and the backhaul from them, that. Honestly, I don't see a huge difference, and that is not only from the small scale areas where we've done with the apps measuring signal strength and dropped calls, etc., but also from the free roaming SIMs that we've got on Trackergy and Traveller. Well, I suppose the problem is most people are concentrated in dense urban areas, but where people are concentrated, the network is quite predominantly going to one network I'm not going to mention, but it's not. It is one of those that people perceive as the weakest. And I have also a friend who lives in the middle of nowhere, and the only 2 networks that they've got over one hill and over another valley is 3 and EE. And so he has 5G modems for both of them. And I mean, the 3 one with the external antenna is much stronger than the EE one. That doesn't mean that 3 is stronger in the middle of nowhere. It just means that in that particular situation, and as we were seeing we're trying to cover the planning that we're doing at the moment. There's so many variables, and then it's just how many people are on it, right? So if you've got a town of 40,000 people and everybody's on Vodafone, it doesn't matter how good the Vodafone network is there. If they all try and make a call at the same time, they're gonna. But and I think this is, it brings us full circle, doesn't it, to the I think why small cells are so important, and why we need to get Open RAN and get, hopefully, if through this merger, Ofcom manage to persuade or Three and Vodafone managed to be advised in a way that they create some remedies for satisfying competition law that actually do help these matters in reality, not just in percentage of population covered, because we are heading to a situation where the PSTN is being ripped out, and the only way to cover that is through 5G, and it's not going to be based on where people live or where they work. It's going to be also where they go for leisure, and so it's going to be, we're in for some very interesting times. But yes, so what's the next one?
Well, for me, the thing that and it probably dovetails into the Vodafone 3 point we've been discussing. Again, there's another report out. I touched on it last week, and I think the week before. There's another report out this week. And again, they were looking at China as an example, but that was just used as an example. It's a global phenomenon, which is the reduced capex across all of the networks. The argument being, to your point, previously, is the 5G, the bulk of the investment in 5G has already happened. And they don't need to spend any more money. So increased coverage, etc., with that feels a bit like good luck with that. And if you're a Vodafone 3, the merger, if you're if you're the CFO of whoever comes out as the senior partner, guess what the environment is to do, and it's not to invest a lot of money in masts, right? Unless the government forces them. So back to my point, that unless there is some regulation and fairly robust, good luck with that Ofcom, provisions put into those, I don't see it getting any better. I genuinely don't see it getting better.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think did I also read that a lot of China's 5G is indoor coverage?
Yes, I think it is.
Which is a lot cheaper from a capex point of view, and so if that's the way that they are expanding, it potentially would be a good way. I mean, we've seen from our own 4G and 5G testing with a single radio placed pretty much anywhere in the building, you can cover it better than a consumer a business grade Wi-Fi on each floor. But we shall see. So that was the one. Yeah, I mean, 1 billion 5G users in China, but it did criticize that. And then there's the telecom infra project. I don't know if anyone's been looking at that. It came to my attention the other day, but it sort of rolls on from the infrastructure comment. I think we do need to find ways to make. It's almost like I've seen the parallel probably in the airline world, where we built these amazing A380s and super jumbos, and now everybody nobody wants to go on them anymore, and we're all shunning long haul travel and mass travel, and it does feel a little that way, doesn't it, with the mobile networks? But that should be something that we'll keep an eye on. And then finally, there was another one of the US invests $9 billion in rural 5G coverage, which is not an insignificant amount, really, is it?
No, it's not. I mean, I reckon they had, I think that particular study said there's 140,000 businesses stroke homes. Homes seems not a big number, but businesses is huge, that currently just do not have coverage. And given the expanse that they're dealing with, mobile is obviously the way to go, rather than laying fibre or alternative into the ground. It just doesn't work. So FCC has realised this, and I think they've specified that at least 10% of it's got to be Open RAN, from memory, which does beg a question, given I've still seen a lot of debate whether Open RAN is the way forward, and various seminars going, has it had its day, etc., etc. Well, my view on that is, what's the alternative? It's not particularly attractive. So why only specify the 10%? Admittedly, that's $900 million, but that feels like a toe in the water, given the money's involved. But
well, I secretly believe, like the DCIT project that we're on at the moment, that governments are looking to use facts to correct the "no one's been fired for buying IBM" rhetoric that we hear all the time. And so if you use an arbitrary number like 10%, but that 10% shows that it's just as robust, etc. And furthermore, what we will find, and I'm pretty sure we'll find, is that the way old networks think and behave is very centralized. And obviously what we're seeing with O-RAN and with private wireless is decentralization. But there's a lot of old thinking still going on where they're trying to centralize that again. And that just increases costs, right? So if you want to basically get the outskirts covered better, then laying fiber where you can, and then using 5G to cover that, and exiting it as close as you can to the, rather than the traditional mobile method, just because of the way that old legacy infrastructure works, is to haul it all the way back and then haul it all the way over and process it all through the systems. And so I honestly think it's a better way, and I've been living that myself as working from home. I've had a backup from 3 to Virgin's 1 gig, and it was running at faster than any fiber broadband at 4G, and at a quarter of the speed of the fiber broadband in 5G. It's just amazing. It's astonishing how a 5G CPE can be faster than any fiber broadband in central London. So good luck by the time you get to the sticks.
There you go. So I generally think that there's going to be a huge place for private 5G and mini cell 5G in for rural applications, because even with the Vodafone and 3 merger, they're still not going to cover all the as Carl calls them, the not spots. So there's still going to be they're going to need companies like us to go and fill those little gaps for them, and that's it. That is what it is.
And temporarily, there still seems to be an obsession that wherever you put a mast, it needs to stay, or it's there for an event and then goes away. But there are just so many things. Every time I have a discussion on this, whether it's lambing, the collecting, the wine collecting, harvesting of various products, it's a year-round issue that people need to be able to, even now, see when the ground dries out, and where the ground has dried out quickest is delaying farmers being able to plant their crops because of how it's just not stopped raining in England since July. And you need coverage to do it. And it's impossible to think that you can blanket cover everything. And the reason the networks sell you MiFis is because sometimes we need coverage when we go. Mobile it's built on the concept of being mobile, not being semi-mobile. And we just need to start applying these theories of decentralization properly, just like sustainability. Just turning your lights off or putting a heat pump in a crappy old house that's as insulated as an egg box is not making a sustainable home. And just doing decentralization by part is not. And I suppose this is where you're saying, Carl, why 10%? I think that's what they could get away with without an argument with the lawyers. But
what drives the networks then to adopt Open RAN and that decentralization? And apart from the usual suspect of it's cheaper, which probably involves an overhaul of the core networks, admittedly, and as they virtualize it, would we see a trend to more Open RAN, or do we just?
I don't. One thing I remind people of with change is, do you ever remember when hot desking came in? There were perfectly professional, fully functional executives who suddenly, rather than coming in at 9 and being productive, were coming in fast asleep at 7 o'clock in the morning, falling asleep at the desk by 11 and ruining their lives and reorganizing it just so they could sit in the same desk. That is how resistant human beings are to change. It's going to be the only way big network operators will adopt Open RAN and decentralization is by the old staff retiring and by policy enforcing and public security enforcing it. And even then, it'll be dragging and screaming. They'll be going, but why? But I need to bring it back to my network. It needs to go through my core. I can't possibly. Yeah, it's just ingrained in, and to the point that almost like the naysayers. No matter how much evidence you give, it's just. But that's the way we've done it. That's best practice. Yeah. It will be. That's I mean, that's the only way, and I think it's brilliant. The FCC are absolutely fantastic. At forcing these kind of things through. Probably, I'd say they're world leading. I mean, they've got. If you look at some of their articles and some of their people, they're not scared of a fight. And I think 10% is where it starts, right? It's like EVs. You've got to start somewhere. And Tesla may not be the perfect EV, and it won't be the EV we have in another 10 years. But my God, did it shake up the industry? And that's what we need. But anyway, on that note, I think we have run over a little bit. Is there anyone for any more?
Not for me.
No, fine by me. Any questions for anybody that's on?
I don't think we've. I mean, we're ones to talk. I don't think we've mastered how to get comments. We will master that by the next one, and hopefully it won't be blowing a hoolie. And I will broadcast from the. There's no reason to. I mean, even if it's blowing a hoolie, you can still broadcast from the car. But we'll do that next week. Good.
Cool. All right. Thanks as ever.
Thanks all. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.